So in this demo, I'm going to hook up the rest of this form with this list of orders for the selected customer, and then the ability to add new orders to that list from the form at the bottom. To do that, we're going to drop into the code behind here, and we're going to need a couple more properties, which I'll go ahead and define as dependency properties so that they can have change notifications as we discussed in the last demo. So first off, for the new order form at the bottom, we're going to have an order object that those fields can bind to called new order. And then for the combo box in that form, we're going to have one called order statuses that's going to be populated with the choices for order status from the database. Next, we're going to need to populate the orders. So I'm going to go up here to where we're initializing our customer information and our data context and add a few more things. First off, we're going to populate that order statuses collection with the list of order statuses from the database. We're still selecting the first customer like we were doing before, and we're setting the data context still to the window as a whole. Just to emphasize from the previous demo, I could actually move this now and set the data context at some point before we start populating the properties on whatever that data context is. As long as those properties raise appropriate change notifications, which the dependency properties do, then it's okay to change these after the fact of setting the data context. Now we also need to populate that new order object. So if I go down to my customer selected handler, I'm going to add in some code, and that code is going to new up a order object and set it as the new order and set the customer ID of that new order to the selected customer in the combo box. Then we're going to go execute a query to get the orders for that corresponding customer and push it into the orders collection of the selected customer object. Now we just need to update our bindings a little bit in the UI. So first I can go into the XAML and I can come find my data grid that the orders are supposed to show up in. I can add a binding here for the item source property, pointing to that selected customer object and the orders collection that hangs off of it. Now we don't have any columns to find here, so it's going to auto-generate the columns based on the properties on that object. And then I'm going to slide down and update the fields in our order form to include appropriate bindings. So up here you can see we're binding the order ID to the new order object .id, new order.order date, new order.items total, and then for the order statuses combo box, we bind that to our order statuses collection on the window. So that we can push the selected value from that combo box into the underlying object, we have a binding on the selected value here that points to the new order.order status ID, but selected value is not a two-way binding property by default. So we have to set the mode property here of the binding to two-way. We'll get into more details on directionality of bindings in a later module. One other thing we're going to want to modify in the code behind here is our add handler. So I'm going to add some code to that basically takes that new order object at the point where the add button is pressed and adds that object into the orders collection on the selected customer. We're also going to persist that change. So you can see that we're taking that new order, adding it to our DB context orders collection and calling save changes. And then you can see we're setting the new order to a new order object, clearing it out basically, but setting the customer ID in case we're going to add multiple orders. If I go ahead and run here, we've got the orders populated for the selected customer. If we pick another customer, you can see it's updating to show just the orders for that current customer. Now, if I go to one that's only got a couple showing here, and I go to enter a new order, I'll pick Halloween here as a date. We'll go with 99.90 as an order total and an order status of picked up. And I click on add. Now you can see the order cleared out at the bottom, but nothing happened up in the grid. If we go ahead and close, start up again, pick that same customer, we can see that new order was actually placed and it was even added to the data-bound collection. It just didn't show up. And this is again because we need change notifications now at a collection level instead of a property level when you're adding and removing things from a data-bound collection. So if we go look at our customer object, we can see the root problem here is that that orders collection on the selected customer is just declared as a list of order. If we set the orders property as a whole, changed out the whole collection, we would have been fine because a property change would have been raised and the binding would have rebound to that new collection. But in this case, we're not swapping out the whole collection. We're just reaching into that collection and adding a new item. And list of T has no change notifications associated with that. So what we're going to want to do is change our property here to be an observable collection of T. And we'll have to go change the member variable as well to be an observable collection. And there's one other place in the code behind where we first populate that orders collection. So we're now newing up an observable collection and passing in the IEnumerable that comes out of this link expression to populate that collection. With that code in place, we can go ahead and run. We can make our selection. Let's add a new order. This one for January 1st, 33 and delivered, and watch the grid up above when we click add. It shows up immediately because that observable collection class raises a collection changed event that bindings are watching for, and the binding will re-render the content based on that. Now, in a similar fashion, I really should go up here. If you remember from previous demo, we had defined this list of customers that we were binding to. I'm going to replace that with observable collection as the type of that collection. Basically, anytime you're exposing a collection for data binding purposes, if there's any chance whatsoever that items will be added and removed to it, then that collection should be an observable collection, not something like a list. And because of that change, we have to change the initialization of this one as well. And we just do a similar thing. We call the constructor of observable collection of T, passing in an enumerable to populate it, and assigning that into our property.